Have you ever loved someone who didn't love you back? Not just liked, not just had a crush on, but truly loved, that aching kind of love, the one that keeps you up at night, spinning reasons in your head. Maybe if you were smarter, more attractive, quieter, louder, maybe then they'd love you too. But no matter how much you give, they remain distant, unreachable. And you're left with one burning question. Why do I always fall for people who don't feel the same? Carl Jung, one of the founding fathers of analytical psychology, has an answer. But it's not the kind of answer you get from a friend trying to comfort you. It's not a cliché about timing or luck. Jung looked deeper, into your soul, into your shadow, into the hidden corners of your psyche where your deepest wounds are stored. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, Jung said. You see, this isn't just about love. It's about patterns. It's about the roles you play without realizing, the people you chase and the ones you run from, the way you are drawn again and again to those who are emotionally unavailable, distant, or simply uninterested. Why? Because you are unconsciously repeating something from your past. This is what Carl Jung called a complex, a cluster of emotionally charged thoughts and feelings buried in the unconscious mind. These aren't just passing memories or moments you forgot about. They are wounds with energy, with power, and they don't fade just because time has passed. In fact, they often get stronger the more we try to suppress them. As Jung put it, what you resist not only persists but will grow in size. Complexes form early. They often begin in childhood when we are most vulnerable and impressionable. For instance, if as a child you felt unseen, unloved, or had to compete for affection, your mind created a psychological imprint that love must be earned, that being good gets you connection, or that you must be useful to be wanted. This is why many people, especially those with a wounded inner child, find themselves gravitating toward emotionally unavailable people. It's not a conscious decision. No one wakes up saying, I want to fall in love with someone who will ignore me. But your unconscious mind is not seeking love, it's seeking familiarity. And to your inner child, rejection is familiar. This cycle becomes what Jung and later psychologists describe as repetition compulsion, a psychological phenomenon where people unconsciously repeat the same patterns of behavior, often trying to resolve unresolved trauma. The famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud described it as an attempt to master the trauma by reliving it in new forms, hoping that this time the outcome will be different. But it never is. You end up reenacting the past. You fall for people who ignore you, who breadcrumb you, who emotionally abandon you, and you think, if I can just get them to love me, I'll finally feel whole. But in trying to fix your past through another person, you dig deeper into the same wound. You see, it's not the love you're addicted to, it's the chase. Why? Because the chase mirrors your early experience of love. If love came in small doses, if affection had to be earned, if you were rewarded only when you behaved, you internalized a message. Love is conditional. Love is rare. Love is hard. And so anything that feels safe, kind, easy, it doesn't feel like love. It feels suspicious, boring, unfamiliar. In fact, researchers in the field of attachment theory, like John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, explored this deeply. They found that individuals with anxious attachment styles tend to idealize unavailable partners. They confuse the activation of the attachment system, that heart-pounding, nerve-wracking feeling, with real emotional intimacy. As therapist Amir Levine writes in Attached, we are attracted to what's familiar, and what's familiar is not always what's good for us. You think it's passion. It's actually anxiety. You think it's love. It's actually repetition. And here's the darkest part. The emotional unavailability is what attracts you. Not because you want to be hurt, but because some part of you believes that if you can just get them to love you, it will heal the child inside who was never truly seen. But love, real love, is not about fixing your past through another person. It's not a battlefield. It's not something to suffer for. It doesn't come at the cost of your self-worth. And yet many people, intelligent, empathetic, even self-aware, fall into this pattern. Why? Because emotional wounds don't operate logically. They operate emotionally. They operate unconsciously. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So what does it look like in practice? You fall for someone who is distant. You rationalize their behavior. They're just busy. They've been hurt before. They need time. You ignore red flags. You cling to the few moments of closeness and amplify them in your mind. You replay every compliment, every text, every eye contact, looking for proof that they feel something. You build a fantasy based on fragments. And every time they pull away, your need for them intensifies, not because they are right for you, but because their rejection activates your deepest insecurity. I am not enough. This is the core belief that drives the cycle. Not just, I am unlovable, but I must become someone else to be loved. Psychologist Dr. Nicole LePera writes in her book, How to Do the Work, we are often more loyal to our wounds than to our healing, meaning we choose what hurts us because it feels familiar, safe, predictable. Even the neurotransmitters in your brain are working against you. When you're in a push-pull dynamic with someone, where affection is given inconsistently, your brain releases dopamine in erratic bursts, similar to how it reacts in gambling or addiction. This creates intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful form of conditioning. You become hooked, not on them, but on the unpredictability of them. Think of a slot machine. Most of the time you lose, but every now and then you win. And that tiny win is enough to keep you playing. That's how emotional unavailability works. You get a smile, a compliment, a night together, and suddenly you forget the weeks of silence that came before it. You are not in love. You are in survival mode. Jung would say, your shadow is playing out its script. And what is the shadow? It's the parts of ourselves we reject, the shame, the unworthiness, the rage, the loneliness. Jung emphasized that healing doesn't come from pretending those parts don't exist, but from facing them, loving them, integrating them. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he said, but by making the darkness conscious. So when you love someone who doesn't love you back, ask, what darkness are they reflecting back to me? What part of me is still waiting to be chosen? Because they aren't rejecting you, they are illuminating the parts of you that you've already rejected. They are showing you the areas where you need to turn inward. This is what individuation is all about, becoming whole. Not finding your other half, not completing yourself through another, but realizing you were never half to begin with. The philosopher Rumi once wrote, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And those barriers often look like this: chasing what hurts, avoiding what's safe, needing drama to feel alive, fearing real intimacy because it demands vulnerability, consistency, and self-worth. So here's the turning point. You begin to ask new questions. Instead of, how can I get them to love me? You ask, why am I trying to prove I'm lovable? Instead of, what's wrong with me that they don't want me? You ask, why am I choosing someone who doesn't want me? Instead of, what should I change about myself? You ask, what do I believe about love that makes me think this is normal? These questions hurt, but they heal. Because once you start healing, your taste changes. You stop finding unpredictability exciting. You stop mistaking anxiety for attraction. You start finding peace desirable, kindness magnetic, consistency sexy. And most of all, you stop begging for the bare minimum. You stop auditioning for love, because now you know love is not something you chase. It is something you allow. Jung taught that healing requires bringing the shadow into the light. This means looking at the parts of yourself you've denied, the part that feels unworthy, the part that craves validation, the part that believes love must hurt. You don't fall for these people by accident. You fall for them because they activate something inside you, something unresolved, something broken. They don't create your pain, they reveal it. And once you realize that, everything begins to change. Imagine stepping back from your romantic obsession, not with bitterness, but with curiosity. Imagine asking, not why don't they love me, but why am I drawn to someone who doesn't? That's where healing begins. Jung believed in the process of individuation, becoming whole. integrating all parts of yourself, even the ugly ones, even the broken ones. And you cannot become whole if you are constantly handing your heart to people who can't hold it. You think it's love, but it's a mirror showing you where your work is, because what you call love is often a projection. You don't see the person as they are, you see them as the answer to your pain, you see them as redemption, as rescue, but no one can rescue you from yourself. And here comes a painful truth. The more you chase someone who doesn't love you, the more you abandon yourself. You ignore your needs, you suppress your voice, you erase your own desires as if they were flaws to be hidden. You silence your truth just to echo someone else's. You abandon your worth. You set aside your boundaries like they're obstacles, not protections. And all of this? It's done in the hope that maybe, just maybe, they will finally see you. But here's the haunting reality. They rarely do. Because when you diminish yourself to fit someone else, you don't become more lovable, you become invisible. This isn't love, it's self-erasure. It is the psychic equivalent of slow suicide, where the soul quietly retreats day by day. As Jung once wrote, shame is a soul-eating emotion. And when you constantly twist yourself to be more acceptable to someone who doesn't value you, it is shame that fuels that transformation, not love. Think about Narcissus from Greek mythology, the man who fell in love with his own reflection. Echo, the nymph who loved him, was cursed to only repeat what others said. She could never speak for herself. She became the background noise to someone else's story. This is the fate of those who love without being loved back. They become echoes, reflecting, mirroring, never creating, and ultimately fading. Even modern psychology backs this up. Studies on attachment theory show that people with anxious attachment styles often find themselves drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, not by coincidence but by compulsion. They mistake unpredictability for passion and inconsistency for depth. They equate longing with meaning, but longing is not loving. It is the hunger left behind when self-love is absent. The philosopher Alain de Botton wrote, "One of the best indicators of someone's psychological health is their choice of partner. If you keep choosing people who don't choose you, the issue isn't them, it's the part of you that believes you deserve this." Carl Jung said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." So look inside. Ask why your soul keeps offering itself up as a sacrifice. Ask why your love language is self-abandonment. And most importantly, ask what would happen if you loved yourself so fiercely you no longer needed to audition for the affection of others, because that's not love, that's exile, and you were never meant to live in exile from your own heart. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because it means facing the parts of you that are still stuck in old wounds. It means letting go of the fantasy. It means choosing someone who actually chooses you. And sometimes that means sitting in loneliness, in silence, in grief. But from that silence, something new is born. Clarity, self-respect, wholeness. You start seeing the red flags not as romantic obstacles to overcome, but as signs to walk away. You stop romanticizing pain. You stop confusing chemistry with chaos. And slowly you begin to turn inward, to hold yourself, to give yourself the love you've been begging others to give, because when you love someone who doesn't love you back, you are really just reliving a relationship you had long before them. Maybe with a parent, maybe with yourself. So what now? You stop chasing, you stop performing, you stop trying to be enough for someone who has already decided they don't want you, and you start being enough for yourself. This is not easy. Your brain is wired for repetition. Familiarity feels safe, even when it's toxic. Your shadow will whisper, just one more try, just one more message. Maybe this time they'll change, but they won't. Because the real change must happen in you. You must break the pattern. You must stand in the discomfort of rejection, not as a victim, but as a witness. Watch how your heart aches. Watch how your mind spins, and don't run. Because every time you stay with your pain instead of fleeing to another fantasy, you heal a little more. Every time you choose not to chase, you reclaim a piece of yourself. That's the journey Jung spoke of, the journey into your unconscious, the descent into the underworld of your psyche, not to escape, but to understand, to integrate, to become whole. You see, you don't want just love, you want recognition, you want to be seen, understood, valued. But here's the truth, no one can see you fully until you do. No one can love you deeply until you love yourself with that same depth. And when you do, you stop settling. You stop accepting breadcrumbs. You stop idolizing people who only ever gave you confusion, because now you are your own anchor. And this is when everything begins to shift. You no longer feel chemistry with those who ignore you. You no longer feel drawn to those who leave you in doubt. Your body, your intuition, your soul start to recognize peace as attractive, kindness as magnetic, and those who cannot meet you in your fullness quietly fall away. When you love people who don't love you back, you live in this loneliness because your truth is not being heard, your needs are not being met, your soul is not being seen. But that ends when you stop abandoning yourself. The greatest love story you will ever write is the one between you and your soul. The day you turn inward, the day you choose you, and from that place of wholeness, love becomes something else entirely. Not a chase, not a reward, not a battle, but a meeting of two whole people, no masks, no wounds driving the wheel, just truth. And that's what Carl Jung ultimately wanted for us, not just to function, not just to survive relationships, but to truly meet ourselves, to walk into the vast, sometimes terrifying landscape of our own soul and say, yes, I am here, I am whole. To embrace the totality of who we are, the messy, the rejected, the tender parts, the longing and the rage, the wounds and the wisdom. Jung didn't believe we should suppress these aspects. He believed we should integrate them, because only when you see all of yourself clearly, without shame, without denial, can you begin to stop searching for love in others and instead become the source of it. This is what he meant by individuation, the process of becoming an individual, whole and self-contained, not dependent on someone else's attention to validate your existence. It's a painful road because it often begins with heartbreak, with loss, with unrequited love. But that unreturned love, it's not meaningless. In fact, it might be your invitation to finally go inward. So the next time you find yourself in love with someone who won't love you back, pause, don't spiral, don't chase, just stop, breathe, and ask, what is this really about? Because if you're brave enough to sit with the pain, rather than run from it, that pain will begin to whisper secrets to you. It will point you toward your unmet needs, your outdated beliefs, your inherited emotional blueprints. It will show you the version of yourself that is still trying to earn affection through effort, still believing you have to prove your worth, still thinking that love is something scarce, something you get in small, controlled doses. And this isn't just psychological, it's biological. Our brains are wired for attachment. Evolutionarily speaking, we are social animals. We survived as a species not because we were the strongest, but because we formed tribes, families, partnerships. From birth, we're hardwired to seek closeness, first from our caregivers, then later from romantic partners. In fact, the same neural pathways that regulate physical pain are activated during emotional rejection. When someone ignores your message or pulls away emotionally, your brain treats it like a physical wound. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman once described social pain as real pain, not metaphorical, but neurologically genuine. This is why unrequited love feels so consuming. It isn't just heartbreak, it's your nervous system reacting as if you're in danger, as if you're being cast out from the tribe, alone, vulnerable, rejected. But here's the key, your biology gives you the impulse to chase, to seek, to reconnect. But it doesn't mean that impulse is always right, especially when it's tied to unresolved trauma. You have to retrain your nervous system. You have to teach yourself that safety and love can come from within, not just from someone else's validation. And this takes time, but it starts with self-awareness, with pausing long enough to ask, Why am I investing so much energy in someone who has shown me they cannot or will not choose me? Take a common example. You text someone. They take hours or days to respond. When they do, it's lukewarm, vague, they never initiate. And yet when they do give you attention, even in small, fleeting moments, you feel elated, alive, connected. That high you feel, it's dopamine, a neurochemical tied to reward and anticipation. But it's not sustainable, and it's not love. It's a biochemical illusion that keeps you addicted to potential instead of reality. As psychologist Dr. Helen Fisher explained in her studies of love and rejection, being in love with someone who doesn't love you back activates areas of the brain associated with addiction and craving, not connection and security. In other words, unrequited love doesn't give you nourishment, it gives you withdrawal symptoms. And yet we romanticize it. We say things like, the heart wants what it wants. But often what the heart really wants is healing, not just another person. So instead of chasing someone who won't meet you, ask, where am I not meeting myself? What needs am I ignoring? What truths am I suppressing? What pain have I been too afraid to face? Because when you stop chasing others, you start turning inward. You begin tending to the very wounds that made you chase in the first place. You become your own caretaker, your own anchor. And slowly, something shifts. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop seeking chaos and calling it passion. You stop giving people the power to define your worth, because now you've stepped through the door your unrequited love opened. And what lies on the other side? You. A version of you who no longer abandons yourself for crumbs. A version of you who is no longer seduced by silence, mixed signals, or emotional unavailability. A version of you who doesn't just want love, but who is love. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." So if unreturned love is what cracked you open, if it brought you to the edge of despair, then maybe it was never a curse. Maybe it was a gift, the kind that burns away your illusions, that teaches you to rise alone, that reveals the self you've been waiting to meet. And once you meet that self, your whole, undivided self, you'll never again chase someone who doesn't see you, because now, finally, you see yourself.